I will now call to order the Monday, September 19th, 2011 informational meeting of the Sioux Falls City Council. A welcome to all of those that are here at Carnegie Town Hall and those of you that are watching on Channel 16. We'll start this afternoon with a report from Councilor Anderson Jr., a report of the meeting of the Public Services Committee from Monday, September 12th, 2011.
Thank you. On that, in that meeting, we did have 3 items on the agenda. We had an update on the recodification project. The update was done by the Chief City Clerk, and Karen Leonard, the Assistant City Attorney, gave additional information regarding proposed updates by the American Legal Publications. This motion was made by Councilman Brown, second by Erfenbach, to send this to the City Council, and that did pass. The second item that we had was a wildlife management plan, and that was given to us by Kelby Maris. And after that, there was a motion to move that also to the council, and that did also pass. The final item on our agenda was an environmental Chapter 18 update and revisions given by Bob Capel. And after that update was given, a motion was made to send this to the council also, and that motion also passed. So the council will have those 3 items, I believe, tonight.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Councilor Anderson Jr.? If not, we'll go on to City Council open discussion. Does anyone have anything? I do have one item. About a month ago, we received notification that the Bowden Youth Center would like to have us tour and have a meal as a thank you. This will happen next Monday, September 26th, between 5 and 6:45 p.m. And we ask that you do RSVP. The clerk's office will be sending out further information. So if you have not received your formal invitation, that will be coming, and we do hope that you will RSVP as soon as possible. Anyone else have anything they'd like to bring before in City Council open discussion? If not, we're going to start our presentations, and there has been an adjustment. Director Cooper has asked if he could go first, and being as flexible as we are, we said sure. So, Director Cooper.
Thank you, Council. Also, thank you, Public Works, for allowing me to switch the order here. I was asked by Councilor Anderson Jr. to give you a briefing of the information that was presented last week at a news conference, and also this is a PowerPoint that was presented at the Park Board meeting last week. It's 8 slides, and I'll go through them relatively quickly. The Park Board was presented this information, and by a vote of 5-0, they did support the TJN site out on East Rice Street. This first slide shows you how this all began with a discussion by myself and XL Energy when they began looking for a location to replace the existing substation, which is just along the east side of Falls Park along Weber Avenue. And Dave Loveland is kind of outlining that for you. That substation is too small because of the power needs of the future, and began looking at opportunities for a new location and still keep it in this general vicinity of the city. So ultimately, the area that's shown in dark yellow is what now is being proposed that would be acquired by XL Energy from Pesca Construction. And this shows about a 15-acre site, of which a portion would be utilized for a new, larger substation, and then the rest of that land would be used for future storage by XL Energy. The remaining land on the north side of the dark yellow and on the west side, we are still having discussions with Pesca about future redevelopment that would still be compatible with Falls Park and this heavy industrial zoning. And we hope to have some announcements on that in the near future. The second slide shows you the land out on East Rice Street that is now being proposed for the metal recycling facility. This is a 25-acre site that would be traded for the TJN Enterprises site plan. This land is currently owned by Xcel Energy. Just to the south of the yellow shows future right-of-way for a long-range expansion of Benson Road as part of the South Dakota 100 long-range plan. And then south of that is the north end of Great Bear Recreation Park. This Rice Street corridor has been identified as a future industrial development area, and this particular area has been rezoned to industrial by action of the City Council. This is another aerial photo kind of showing you the current condition of that property. It has been farmed in the past, a portion of this land, and then the balance of it would have to be reconfigured. It goes up in elevation to a hillside along the east side. This is another view of going out along Rice Street. Some of the requirements that made this site desirable: the proposed driveway to the TJN site is about a half mile from Great Bear Recreation Park driveway. The driveway to the Great Bear parking lot entrance, again, it's about 4,000 feet. And from the top of Great Bear to the TJN driveway, there's about a mile there of distance. This shows you the proposed site plan for the metal recycling. So the right-hand side of the drawing is looking to the east or north, and then the left-hand side of the drawing would be the south side of the property. So you would come in with a new entrance that lines up with an existing entrance on the west side of Rice Street. This would be the staging area for the truck parking as well as the general public. There's a parking lot that would be developed. And then there would be an access drive that would extend into the property. The dark gray boxes show future buildings for different aspects of their operation. The round circles represent outside storage of the scrap metal. And there will be a landscape berm along the Rice Street frontage, as well as the Great Bear Recreation Park adjacent property line. They will also be putting in an 8-foot-high decorative wall to also provide screening. And then the buildings will be placed so that they will also provide a buffer to the internal operation of the metal recycling facility. This is the plan that will now be going through City Planning Commission as part of a conditional use permit application. And so we'll be working with our normal review process. They will have to address water, sewer, on-site storm drainage, access, the future rail spur, the berming and screening. All of those things will be brought into more of a detailed proposal as it goes through the City Planning Commission consideration. You're kind of see, but these are some elevations that TGN put together to, again, try to reinforce what they are attempting to do in terms of screening this development with the landscape berm, tree planting, and then the wall and building configuration. Much like you would see as you go out there now with concrete materials, where there's a berm with trees to give you that year-round screening as much as possible. When we talked to the park board about this, the concern was the impact on the Great Bear Park rail crossing. This is an Ellison Eastern rail spur. It will still be one train a day, so it will not increase the number of trains with this operation. And again, because of the separation between this driveway and Great Bear Recreation driveway, there will not be any increase in terms of blockage of that entrance from what you would see today. So, but those are some of, again, the details that we're going to work through with the Park Board, or I should say with the Planning Commission review. So that's a real quick overview of what has been presented. And as I said, the Park Department, the Park Board supported this by a vote of 5-0. And we will now be working through the Planning Commission, which is scheduled for October 5th. If there are no appeals to the Planning Commission decision, that would be the end of it. If there is an appeal, either way, then that would come to the City Council for another public hearing. Do you have any questions?
Questions for Director Cooper? Councilor Anderson Jr.
Not so much a question, Mike. You and I talked a little bit earlier about this. There has been some concerns by property owners to the west of Rice Street about drainage of this. So that's something we'll want to be looking at.
Yes, that will go through our normal review with Public Works on drainage requirements for this type of a development.
Thank you.
Councilor Brown.
Dave, can we go back to the first map with the substation?
Sure. Yep.
Just need a confirmation on a couple of things, Mike.
Yep, it's slow.
Okay.
One more.
So the existing substation right by Falls Park goes away, correct?
That's part of the long-range plan, is that once the new substation is up and operational, that would allow XL to basically clear out the site and then remove that from operation.
And would the city buy that property? Is it gifted to us?
Well, we're still having those discussions internally, but I believe that all the parties, the intent is that the city will ultimately have that property. That's
Okay.
the goal.
And what is the timeline for moving to the new substation? Do we know?
2012, 2013 timeline.
And then if we could go, Dave, to the next map again. I was just having trouble getting my head around it. Show me where Great Bear is in relation to this. Is it to the bottom there?
Yes, it's to the bottom.
Got it.
Yep.
All right. Thank you.
Yes.
Councilor Karski.
Thank you. Mike, a couple quick questions if I could. I've been out to TJN where they're currently at. It's a busy, noisy place. Any of the new operations going to be, I see a lot of more buildings right now than they currently have. Are any of the operations going to be in buildings? And then the second question, on the berm and the landscaping, you know, I guess I've been involved in other projects and seen other projects where, you know, we don't want 1 foot evergreen trees. Are we going to be requiring something a little bit bigger to make it a little more pleasing initially?
Yes. First of all, this site is 25 acres versus about 5 that they have currently. So they have outgrown. That's why the piles are so big and so much of the operation is outside. This is a state-of-the-art facility. They're going to be investing, they said, between $10 and $14 million in this new facility. So the majority of the operations will be inside buildings. That's the goal. And yes, the landscaping, we will start out with something more comprehensive than seedlings. That's ultimately what we want to do with them. And they're very, very willing to have more of a comprehensive land plan.
Councilor Erpenbach.
That may have answered my question about the substation. I was looking back at that because we'll have the same sort of conversations with XL when they move too, correct? In terms of, I mean, that substation now kind of just sits out there. Will this one then be a little more pleasing to the
Yes.
eye? We're
Yes.
looking at that with them too.
Yep, we'll be working with them too on not only the where it's placed on the site, but also what it looks like around that, the perimeter of the substation.
Okay, great. Thank
Yes.
you.
If you ever get down on South Louise, they just recently completed a new substation that's out in a residential area. And of course, a lot of the landscaping hasn't matured yet, but that's the kind of new construction standards that they're willing to incorporate now.
Counselor Brown?
The existing TJN site, the 5-acre site, through the years have had a number of concerns from neighbors. What is the intent for that property once TJN moves out?
What they have said so far is that they intend to keep using that for some time, but they'll be transferring the major part of the operation out to the new Rice Street side. We don't know if they're ultimately going to abandon that completely or not, but I think the hope is that it'll be a transition that will eventually move at least all the major parts of that operation out to the Rice Street site.
But we have no guarantees for that neighborhood that operations will cease there.
I think, again, that maybe is part of the confirmation as we go through the conditional use permit, maybe to get more of a commitment as to what's going to happen to that site.
And would they be obligated in any way to get rid of what is there, even if they don't use that site, so it doesn't just stay there?
Yes, that's all the discussions that we've had with them, that they realize that the reason that we've spent so much time looking for a new location is that they need to downsize and eventually phase out that existing operation, and that's really what their goal is too.
Very good.
Yeah.
Thanks.
It's been a long time coming.
Counselor Jameson?
Mike, sounds like you've been working on this for a year or more, is that right? Maybe more?
We've been looking for other sites for multi-years, but this particular proposal, yeah, it's been quite a while.
Just first glance, sure seems like a good fit. Seems like Xcel Energy is a good partner to try to make this work for us. How big is their footprint going to be when they come back to the falls?
Well,
the stockyards, essentially. It seems like a large area. Is that larger than they really need?
Yes.
Okay.
They started out with 5 acres, and then they said, well, we better get 10 just to have some future protection around. But through the negotiations, it ended up at 15. So that's much larger than what their needs are going to be.
And does Xcel then take responsibility for taking care of the soil and drainage issues?
Yes.
And even some of the buildings on that property at the stockyards?
Yeah, they will be working with Pesca to, Pesca is, let me kind of step back. Assuming that the TJN site gets approved in October, the next step is that Pesca would then set up a timeline to begin the demolition and clearance of the existing stockyards.
All of it, or just that portion?
All of it.
Oh, good.
Going into this fall, winter, spring, so that when Xcel is ready to begin their construction next year, that'll be a clean site.
Great. Great. Thank you.
That's the intent. And a lot of the metal that's currently at the stockyards, they'll have a place to take that.
Counselor Anderson, Jr.
Mike, taking a look at this plan here for the stockyards, where is actually going to be the access road?
It will be where Falls Park Drive and Weber Avenue currently intersect. It'll be directly east of
It'll
that.
just be that gravel road that's there now? And
Yeah, they'll be developing
Right.
an access road into there.
okay, thank you.
It'll be a private access.
Thank you, Director Cooper.
Thank you. I took longer than I promised Mr. Capel, but that's okay.
We'll now hear from Bob Capel, Environmental Manager, on proposed revisions, ordinance, Chapter 18, garbage and recycling.
Good afternoon. I'm Bob Capel. I'm with the Public Works Environmental Division, and we greatly appreciate the council chair and council members to allow us to give you this information about the proposed revisions to Chapter 18 of the Garbage and Recycling Ordinance of the City of Sioux Falls. Today I have with me as my team, I have Director Mark Cotter, I have Dave McElroy, our landfill superintendent, Amy Ladonsky, our sustainability coordinator, to help me answer any questions that you may have. First of all, just for some informational, my slide presentation is 22 slides tonight, and I apologize, it is lengthy because the Solid Waste Planning Board has been working on revisions to this ordinance for 3 to 4 years, and we're finally bringing it to your attention. This evening, we will scale that back and give you a shorter version, about 12 slides, I promise. So, first of all, as you know, the City of Sioux Falls owns and operates a major regional landfill. The Sioux Falls Regional Sanitary Landfill basically accepted approximately 170 tons of municipal solid waste in 2010. That is a significant amount of municipal solid waste, and our landfill has a limited, finite amount of space. Because of that, we basically are attempting to do whatever we can to basically increase our recycling and to reduce the amount of solid waste generated in our region that goes to that landfill. As you also know, we have kind of a unique collection system. The City of Sioux Falls does not own and operate the collection system, but rather it is basically owned and operated by the private sector. And so far it's been a very successful private partnership, public partnership, except for the fact that we as a team, a management team in the city, believes that we should be able to receive and gain more recycling efforts out in the community. And so those are the efforts that we're trying to achieve to work with that private solid waste collection community in the City of Sioux Falls. Some of the things the council historically has done to help us get there is they basically selected what they called required recyclables. And these recyclables have been excluded or banned from our landfill. And we've had that list for many, many years. And there really wasn't a success of getting a large quantity of those materials out of our waste stream. So about 6 years ago, the City Council basically made another major step and basically adopted what they call the recycling goal. And recycling goal is basically an average of the 30, 40 haulers that use our facility, what were their recycling rates. So in essence, what is the community willing to recycle? And we take last year's recycling rates, the average, and move that into the next year as a recycling goal for all haulers to try and meet. As for example, in 2010, the average recyclers, solid waste licensed haulers recycle about 15%. So in 2011, our recycling goal is 15%. One thing also to be aware of, the South Dakota DNR and also adopted some codified laws and regulations that basically place regulations on us as the owner and manager of that facility to basically do whatever we can to basically reduce solid waste coming to that landfill and increase our recycling rates. And so that's what we're attempting to do here today. One thing that we have that's assisting us with that is the Solid Waste Planning Board. As you know, the mayor has a board that is 15 members appointed by the mayor. It consists of individuals from citizens of Sioux Falls. The hauler and recycling industry are represented on that board. There's representatives of Lake, Lincoln, McCook, Minnehaha, and Turner counties on that board. There's public works staff on that board, also from the South Dakota Multiple Housing Association. There's a wide, broad perspective of individuals on that board, and it's been a very good board to work with. The reason why there's so many different people on that board is to remember that this facility serves 5 counties, and it serves approximately 240,000 population. Today we're going to come to you and make some proposed revisions to Chapter 18. And the main purpose of these revisions are basically to perform some minor cleanups. We do have some employee titles that need to be changed. We also have some grammar changes that need to be changed in the ordinance. Second of all, we want to bring the code up to what are really the existing industry practices out there. The industry is actually ahead of our code, which is a good thing, and we want to bring the code up to that common practices. And the third part basically is to take it to the next level. What can we do to basically improve the recycling efforts and reduction of solid waste coming to our solid waste landfill, and ultimately to extend the life of that landfill? What I'm going to do now is basically just briefly give you an overall, the main portions changes, the substantive changes to the ordinance. The first thing that's going to take place is we're going to emphasize this as a required recyclable materials to support the existing code, excluding these certain recyclables from the landfill. Second, we're going to basically allow the source separated and single stream recycling in our community. We are going to establish criteria for recycling containers. We are going to require recyclable collection at least twice per month. We're going to require businesses to report recyclable materials. We are going to prohibit the collection of visible recyclable materials in the solid waste stream. We're going to require that garbage generated in Sioux Falls must be disposed of at our landfill. We're going to establish a recycling incentive or a rebate for garbage haulers that are doing a great job. And we're going to establish a recycling disincentive or a surcharge for those garbage haulers that are doing a poor job. We're also going to improve and emphasize the pay-as-you-throw hauler rates that benefit our customers. We're going to improve the methodology for calculating the city's recycling goal. We're going to establish an enforceable recycling standard. We're going to improve recycling reporting requirements. And we're going to establish an enforcement strategy for the failure to comply with this recycling standard. And then finally, we're just going to do some cleanup on the solid waste composition, the solid waste planning board. What I'm going to move into now is basically talk to you about some of the major changes on a specific item. Under Section 18-16, we're changing the language to basically, again, to bring our code up to the existing current industry practices. We do allow source separation recycling, and we do allow single stream recycling, and this changes basically ensures that they are both allowed in our region and our community, as the pictures depict. The next major change is under 18-17. Again, we're going to now require that recycling containers have criteria in order to be considered a recycling container. As you know, we basically require rigid and watertight containers for garbage. We're going to place those same criteria on recycling containers. And the reason behind that is two major reasons. To help keep our community clean. If any of you have been out in our city on a windy day, and we do have our windy days in Sioux Falls, you'll end up, and as I do, walk around my neighborhood after a windy day and pick up the recyclable milk jugs and stuff that have been blown out of the neighbor's recycling container and mine. So we're going to try and prevent that from happening. And second of all, we're trying to prevent a valuable resource, the recycled materials that the customers want recycled and are placing out there for recycling to be damaged by precipitation events. Cardboard and paper products, if they sit out in a precipitation event, can be destroyed and may make them not valuable any longer, may turn them into a waste stream instead of a recyclable material. The next major changes are basically, again, we're kind of emphasizing that this is a required program. So in Section 18.1, 18.21, 1824, and 1861, we're placing the term required in those sections of the code. The next thing we're going to basically do is allow glass to be concluded as a recyclable material. We currently allow it, again, bringing it up to current practices, but we are not placing glass as a required recyclable at this time. And the reason behind that is we do not believe from a local perspective there is a good enough market at this time to require it. But we want to get that incentive out there to start recycling glass, and then maybe we might have enough material to get a customer to use recycled materials, so someday ultimately we'll be able to require glass to be recycled. And the last change is basically we're going to clean up the language on plastics. Some parts of the ordinance it clearly states that only plastics 1 and 2 are required to be recycled, and in the definition it does not state that, and this is a cleanup to ensure that our language is consistent throughout the ordinance. The next major changes are dealing with 1821 and Section 1822. Again, this is another of those practices that's probably taking place by most of our haulers. We are going to basically require that all licensed haulers provide recycling pickup from residential and non-residential customers at least twice per month. The next major section change is Section 1825, and that deals with business recyclable reporting. Currently, there is a lot of businesses that have determined that it's much more cost-effective for them to recycle their materials themselves, and they can actually make more money versus giving it to their waste hauler to have them recycle it. So what we're basically going to do is this is going to give us the authority to help the hauler if they have a business that is recycling materials through themselves or their corporation, to get that information to assist them to show what recycled materials that company is actually recycling. Because in essence, it's a disadvantage to that hauler. If they are servicing a large box store in the city of Sioux Falls, and that box store has a corporate policy that they take all their corrugated cardboard out and recycle it themselves, that hauler doesn't have the opportunity to recycle that material. In essence, that hurts their recycling rate. So what we want to do is make sure to be able to give them the legal authority, if they are not successful getting that information themselves, that we can, as a city, go and require that large box store to supply that information to the haulers. And I think it's going to be a very good thing for the community and the individual haulers servicing those accounts. The next section is basically dealing with visible recyclables. We're going to place a little more accountability on the haulers, because we do hear complaints from time to time that the garbage haulers pick up recyclable materials, throw it in their trucks where they're hauling solid waste. We are changing this and adding a new section to basically require that they can no longer pick up and accept visible recyclable materials. And as the picture here depicts, this is what we're looking for. We're looking for gross violations, something very apparent. We do not expect the garbage haulers to dig through the garbage bags to see if there's recycled materials in there, but where there's a gross, obviously visible recycled material, we expect them not to take that into the solid waste stream. In this situation, we would be asking those haulers to not accept that, place a note with that customer and say, hey, you need to basically put this in recyclable materials next time and we'll pick it up. An educational process. The next change we're going to basically do, we talked about, is allow that any solid waste that's generated within the City of Sioux Falls must be disposed of at our landfill. And the primary reason for that is to basically prevent any abuses of the current system that we are developing. There is always a potential that somebody could basically take some of their solid waste and maybe take it to Brookings to lower their tonnages of solid waste, which would in essence raise their recycling rate, and we want to try and prevent that from occurring in this situation. So, the next major change is basically it's called pay-as-you-throw. It's a very common practice around the country. It's becoming a very, very strong tool to help improve recycling. And this is in Section 1859. And we basically have a section already there that deals with pay-as-you-throw, but we're going to basically reinforce that. And we're going to make it stronger. And what we're basically asking is that every hauler that's licensed with the City of Sioux Falls must provide all customers at least 2 levels of garbage service. Otherwise, 2 different sizes of cans or containers. And what we're trying to do there is let the customer know that if they use a smaller garbage container, they're going to pay less, which is a good thing. And if they have a smaller garbage container, they might sit and say, well, I'm going to improve my recycling because I want a cheaper garbage rate. I'm going to put it in my recycling container. So it's basically an incentivized program to kind of get haulers to provide 2 levels of service to help us improve the recycling rates. I truly believe, and I think there may be some haulers already that provide more than 2 levels of service, but I think it'll be a common practice in the near future where haulers provide more than 2 levels of service, and we're starting out at 2 levels of service. And this is just an example on the display of what we're really talking about. We're telling them how big a difference in size of containers, at least. We're not telling what size they have to be. They can pick whatever size they want. And we're basically telling them that they at least have to have a 25% difference between those size containers. Again, we're not telling them what rate they need to charge. It's their choice what they want to charge. It's just we're saying there has to be at least a differentiation between those two to make it an incentive to a customer to use a smaller garbage container. The next major change is the recycling goal calculation. In the past, since we developed a recycling goal, it was basically generated by the average of the hauler's recycling rate. When I became reviewing this in this last year, I really felt that was not a true depiction of the recycling rate or recycling goal in our community, and it's very easy to skew that because, as we know, we have very small haulers and we have very large haulers in our community, in our region. So in essence, we could have 5 garbage haulers that are the smallest that are in the group, and they could have the highest recycling rates, and because of that, that would really give us a false high recycling goal, because it's really not true depiction. Or vice versa, those 5 smallest haulers could have the lowest recycling rate, and that would give us a false low recycling goal in our region. So we're going to change that. We're proposing to you to go away with the average of the rates, and we're proposing to basically just do a mass balance approach. Total tons of recyclable materials that are verified divided by the total tons of verifiable recycled materials plus the total verifiable solid waste taken in by our landfill. A very simple calculation. It truly becomes a community-based recycling goal versus an average of recyclers at different sizes of solid waste haulers. We think that's going to be a very good plus for our community to share with other communities around the nation. The next major change is 1862. And this is also changed to the same section we had, and we will be establishing not only the goal, but now a true standard. In the last 6 years that we've had a recycling goal, technically we could, the ordinance says we may revoke a license for not meeting the recycling goal. The City of Sioux Falls has not revoked one license since that goal has been established, and realistically, from most correspondence with legal counsel, the standard is not strong enough to revoke a license on its own. So we're now going to place a true standard that we will enforce. The goal is a goal, a standard is a standard. And as an example, the recycling goal in 2011, as we've discussed, is 15%. If you adopt these changes, we will basically require all haulers to meet at least 80% of that recycling goal. And we believe that's a very attainable standard in our view. And so in 2011, now we will have an enforceable standard of 12%. The goal is 15%, and we're hoping that all will meet at least the standard of 12%. To give you an example, and on your slides next is basically a graph of the existing licensed haulers that handle residential solid waste within our region. As you can see, there's extreme wide variety in the recycling rates of these haulers. The top one is over 32% recycling rate, while we have some sitting down around 4%, and some of those in the lower level are actually at 0 at times. That really tells us that we do have some haulers that have refused to really get on the bandwagon, be a partner with us, and to really try and recycle out in our community. As you can take a look here about if there's no changes based on the current rates, if 2011 stays the same, about 60% of our haulers will meet that recycling standard and 40 will not. Okay. The next major change is 1866, dealing with recycling facility reporting. One of the things the board has heard is we've heard complaints that, well, some recycling methodologies have more waste in their waste stream versus other recycling methods. And we listen to those concerns, and this is basically just going to allow us to basically place in the code that any recycling facility within our region, we will require them to basically tell us how many tons are coming in as recycled materials, then how much through your processing is being now sent back to the landfill. Because they all probably generate some waste in their processing, and we need to know that. As an example, if there is a recycling facility that takes in 100 tons of recyclable materials a year, and 20 tons of it is going back to landfill, that may be a concern we need to address in the future. The next major change is dealing with 1830, subsection O. This is the incentive that we talked about. I think this is the best part of these changes that we're proposing to you. As I said before to a subcommittee, it's really the carrot and the stick. We're really trying to give an incentive and a penalty for those who aren't on board with our approach to basically reduce and recycle in our community. Any hauler that basically exceeds our recycling goal by 50%, we will basically be giving them a $1 per ton of municipal solid waste as a rebate at the end of the year. So that's a rebate, that carrot. The next change is on 1830P, and this is the disincentive for those haulers that are doing a poor job in recycling. We have established a two-tier system because we didn't want to hit them hard initially. The first year that they do not meet the recycling rate, we will be assessing them a surcharge for that year of $1 per ton of municipal solid waste that is brought to our landfill. To give you an example, that's about a 3% increase in our tipping fees, if you're wondering where that's at. The second year, if a hauler does not meet that recycling rate 2 years in a row, then we will have a second tier surcharge, and we will charge them $2 per ton of solid waste that they haul to our landfill as a surcharge. Again, that will be the stick to help us through this process. And I truly believe a incentive without a disincentive will not be successful. And I truly believe a disincentive without an incentive is not really fair to our good haulers out there trying to do a great job for our community. The next slide, basically, I want you to focus on the blue and the red. If we implemented these surcharges and incentives, the blue is basically if everybody stayed at their current recycling rates, the haulers, we would estimate that at the end of 2011, we would pay out approximately $38,000 in rebates to the top 5 haulers. Because right now there's 5 haulers that exceed 50% of our recycling goal. The second part is the $19,808, so approximately $20,000 we would then surcharge those haulers that did not meet the recycling rate, and there's approximately 12 at this time that are not meeting that recycling rate. So just to give you an idea, they're not large aggregate numbers, but we believe they're a good step in the right direction to show the haulers that we do mean business and we are there to help them through this process. The next major change is basically the enforcement strategy. This is something that I personally feel we need a strong, clear enforcement strategy if we are going to take the step of revoking licenses from haulers that are basically refusing and making a strong attempt to recycle in our region. And this standard is based on a 3-year approach. Again, the first year that a hauler does not meet our standard, we would charge them the surcharge rate of $1 per ton, And we'd also make them submit us a corrective action plan, what they're going to do to help change their business practices to meet that recycling standard. They can develop themselves. I've been tasked, our staff, to basically, we'll be working on some model corrective action plans that we will work with those haulers to reduce their cost, to help them get a system in place to improve their recycling standard. If the second year they do not meet their recycling standard, 2 years in a row, then we ratchet things up a little bit. We will charge them $2 per ton of solid waste they haul to the landfill for the year that they're in noncompliance. And then we'll also require them to now go out and hire a professional engineer qualified to develop a true corrective action plan to help them come into compliance, because that is our ultimate goal. We want the haulers to comply with our standards, and we want to help them keep in business, and then we hope that we'll achieve that. The third year, 3 years in a row, a hauler, again, does not meet the recycling standard, it is our proposal and the board, the Solid Waste Planning Board, to basically revoke their licenses. We believe 3 strikes and you're out is more than fair. And as I shared to other council members and other people on our team, since I proposed this, almost every comment I've received, I think every comment I've received, is that this is not restrictive enough. But we do believe it's adequate. We do believe it will meet what we need to have done. And I think it's fair to everybody. And eventually, within 3 years, we will have a fair playing field for all haulers doing business within our region. The last change we're talking about is 1881 section, and it deals with the Solid Waste Planning Board. We're again just doing some cleanups. The number was wrong, how many members were on the board, and also we're going to, basically a question was asked, why can't somebody outside the City of Sioux Falls sit on that board? And the board agreed there's really no reason. If anybody's within our 5-county region and it's not designated by ordinance that they have to be a citizen of Sioux Falls, we have agreed that we should be able to allow anybody within the 5-county region to sit on that board, and that's the major changes. So we really do hope and that our presentation today will basically tell you the reasons why we need to make these changes, and hopefully we've done something that's prudent and reasonable. And I guess we'd like to open it up now for questions from you that we can answer from our team.
Questions for Mr. Capel. Councilor Urbanbach.
I did have a bunch of questions during committee, so if there are others that were not on the committee that want to ask first, I just have follow-up from the other day. Okay.
Councilor Karski.
Thank you. Just going through, and like on, I believe it's your 8th slide, you're changing it from residential recyclables to required recyclables, and then 3 slides later, businesses recyclables reporting. How is this ordinance change going to affect businesses and their recycling, or I think lack of recycling plan?
Right. I think what this really does, Councilmember Karski, is I don't think it's going to change a lot in what the businesses do. It's basically just showing that we do count commercial and business recycling, where the ordinance was not really clear in that in the past. And also this basically is going to require them, if they are recycling and not giving that recycled materials to the haulers, they have to provide that information to the haulers. We don't think it's going to be burdensome, because most of the times there's usually somebody else doing that recycling for them. Either their corporate headquarters is doing it, or they're hiring somebody else to recycle the material. So it's just basically asking for that information and getting it to the hauler in the city. So in essence, I don't think it's going to change a lot, but it's going to basically make that more accountable and trackable. They already are required to recycle.
Councilor Anderson Jr.
Excuse me. On the second year, with a 60-day notice, must have an environmental engineering consultant, and you stated qualified.
Yes, that is
Are
correct.
you going to have a list of qualified businesses and that to provide to these haulers so they're able to select one?
Yes, we've had that question, and from our viewpoint, pretty much every engineering firm that has an office in City of Sioux Falls would be qualified. Okay. So it's not going to be an issue. It's just, we want that there just in case the hauler would maybe have an electrical engineer who's a cousin out in California, has no knowledge about solid waste. We want that ability to sit and say, as a team, we don't think they're qualified unless they showed us their credentials. So.
Thank you.
Counselor Erpenbach.
Thank you. Thanks, Bob. This is a really a good presentation. I wrote myself a note to write you a note that it's very clear, and you went through those changes very clearly on the slides. I appreciate that. A couple of questions. One, and I asked you this the other day, is about enforcement for tenants in rental units. I mean, we put so much burden on the haulers, which, you know, rightfully so, it's part of their business, but at some point, it then becomes the property owner and the manager or whatever, their responsibility. Can you talk a little bit about how we're going to help those tenants so that it helps the haulers meet our compliance, or does it have to go back the other way? Maybe I'm reading it wrong.
That is probably one of the most difficult areas in our community, to get as high of a recycling rate out of a multi-housing unit versus a single-family home. That is really a difficulty. Our efforts are going to be devoted to the owners and managers of those facilities. I think it'd be very difficult to go to the tenants of those properties. We will reach them through our normal educational processes that we do everybody else. As you've probably listened on the radio, Amy's done some great job on some recycling ads, and they're going to be educated like anybody else. But our outreach will be to the tenants or the manager of those multi-housing units, and we have already in the past, we've worked with them to help them develop the signage and the information for them. And what these ordinance changes will do, and what I see is what's going to help us, is that if the hauler does their job and they go to these multi-housing units and there's recycled materials consistently in the solid waste stream that's visible, they're going to refuse to take that material. And if they do not get the cooperation from that landlord or that manager, that operator, they would be able to turn to us and say, we're not getting their cooperation. Now we have a standard basically says they can't accept it, and it gives us a little more authority to go back to that property owner or manager. I think it's going to be good. It'll be helpful. It may not solve all of our problems, but it's going to help.
Yeah, no, it's a great start, and I really appreciate the changes that you're proposing. My other question, I want Bob to stay here, but it's kind of a question to the group. I had always, and it's not in the changes that Bob has proposed, I had always, as a citizen, liked that idea that Sioux Falls doesn't allow curbside pickup, that we keep it close to the house. It has, you know, a certain amount of space. I had not until this weekend heard any complaints about that process in Sioux Falls, and so my question is to fellow counselors, is this something we need to look at now too? I had seriously never heard any complaints about this before. Thoughts?
Counselor Jamison?
I would oppose bringing them out to the curb because it creates a unpleasant atmosphere within the neighborhoods, and there is potential for then the wind to capture it and tip it over and cause a bigger mess. I actually went through the same process myself, and the rationale, as I understand it, Bob, you might know better, but is to keep it close to the house, keep the neighborhood from looking like a hit-and-miss garbage collection site, but also to provide some wind protection for those cans so they don't tip over. That's how I understand it, and I like that logic.
Okay. Counselor Brown?
It may work in other communities where they have one service, but the key difference is that we have 30 providers, so there'd be trash out by the street every single day in every single neighborhood in Sioux Falls, which just wouldn't work very well, I don't think, because of what Councilor Jamison talked about.
Counselor Karski?
My thoughts exactly. I mean, you have a neighborhood and you could have trash pickup 5 days a week. 5 days a week you'll have trash cans sitting on the curb, so I don't think it would do a lot for our community.
Okay, good. That answers my questions. Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Capel? Counselor Jamison?
A couple of questions, Bob. How do you enforce businesses? Like, say, let's just take a business like Get and Go, and you got people who are throwing their trash, dropping their trash off there, or a car, and they unload their garbage into a big dumpster or can. Are you going to suggest that they have recycling containers and other trash containers? And then tell me more about how you're going to enforce that.
And I'm going to ask my staff to verify this, the ordinance section. We do have a current ordinance already that basically requires people to basically have recycling containers within their facility. Has it been enforced? Probably not too well. So that already does exist. I believe it's 18.3b. Is that right? Memory right? Yeah, 18.3, basically, we do have requirement of receptacle containers. That is required. To be honest with you, it's probably an area that the city has not enforced very well on. And the problem is, again, is language, and it says they have to have sufficient. And so it becomes an interpretation issue, what's sufficient. And as when our last meeting, somebody talked about the airport. We did do a follow-up on the airport. They do have recycling containers, but in our view, may not be sufficient, but in their view, there may be sufficient. So that is a debatable issue, and I appreciate your comment, Council Member. I think that will something we'll address with the board in the future meetings if there's a need to change anything there. So,
Right. I'd just like to stress that as long as when you use the word require, it just is pretty strong.
It is.
And I get nervous anytime that gets written. But I really do like the efforts you're doing on educating the public about the value of recycling. So I would encourage you to do even more, like you're proposing, like at the airport. The other one is the garbage generated in Sioux Falls must be disposed at the Sioux Falls landfill.
yes.
Will that then require that there be lines drawn for some of these garbage haulers that if they fall outside the county, that they can't collect it? Have you considered the idea of how that's going to impact some of the haulers who are out there trying to generate business? They get a couple households who fall outside the county, but are you going to be drawing lines for businesses? That's what I'm concerned about.
If I can explain it in this way, currently, the state of South Dakota established these regional landfills, and they were ones that established the 5-county region for our region. The state basically requires any community within that region to use our landfill. It's already there. It may not be as strong as we need from a local perspective, and we put this in there because we wanted to kind of show by example. We do not know. There may not be one can of garbage taken outside of our region into a different landfill. We don't know that. It's just that we saw potential abuse of that potentially happen. So we wanted to lead by example and say, hey, Sioux Falls first, you're required to basically take that waste. I truly believe 99 or 100% of the garbage that's being collected within our region is coming to our landfill. So I don't think there's an issue there that will create a problem for a hauler who, once they step out of the city of Sioux Falls, people in Brandon, they're bringing their waste to Sioux Falls. People in this 5-county region are coming to Sioux Falls anyway. It's just a local requirement, just in case somebody wanted to abuse it.
Any other questions for Mr. Capel? If not, thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Is there any other business to bring before this body? If not, the meeting is adjourned.